July the 28th, 1931, New York City. Feared mobster Vincent "Mad Dog" Coll and his crew are on the hunt for blood. Their target, Joey Rayo, is a top lieutenant of Coll's sworn enemy, Dutch Schultz. For the past year, Coll and Schultz have been locked in a brutal gang war that has left more than 20 mobsters dead on each side, along with 2 innocent women. The body count of the infamous Bronx Beer Wars is about to rise. That afternoon, Joey Rayo stands outside the Helmar Social Club on 107th Street. This speakeasy, controlled by Dutch Schultz, is in a busy residential area. Children are playing on the sidewalks, families hang out of apartment windows, hoping to feel a breeze in the sweltering summer heat. An open touring car containing Mad Dog and 5 of his crew slowly pulls up. A shotgun erupts from the window, then a .45 pistol barks out behind it, and the deadliest gang war in New York history sinks to a new low. Rayo ducks for cover and escapes unharmed. The children playing aren't so lucky. A 7-year-old is shot twice in the back. A 3-year-old, sleeping in his stroller, is peppered with shotgun blasts and rushed to the hospital. 5-year-old Michael Vengali is struck 3 times by Coll's pistol and dies right where he was playing. The brutal murder of a child sends shockwaves through the city, and overnight, Mad Dog Coll becomes the most hated man in America. The NYPD launches a nationwide shoot-on-sight manhunt, not just for the Mad Dog, but for Dutch Schultz as well.
And it's painfully clear that this savage war, which had already claimed the lives of over 40 mobsters, 2 innocent women, and now a 5-year-old boy, has to end one way or another. But to understand how it got to this point, how this gangland feud spiraled into one of the most deadly wars that New York had ever seen, we have to go back. And we have to go back into the lives of the 2 men who started it all.
Mad Dog Coll, real name Vincent Coll, was born in Gweedore, a small Irish-speaking parish in the northwest of Ireland, in 1908. The youngest of 7 children, Coll emigrated with his family to America in 1909 when he was just 10 months old. They settled in the Bronx, joining the massive wave of Irish immigrants who arrived in New York in the early 20th century. Coll's childhood was marked by tragedy and hardship. His mother died of tuberculosis when he was just 8 years old, and shortly after, his father abandoned the family. Left to fend for themselves, Vincent and his siblings grew up on the violent, poverty-stricken streets of the Bronx, rarely attending school and learning survival the hard way. By the time he had turned 18, Coll had already been arrested 15 times and was rolling with the Gophers, an Irish gang that ruled Hell's Kitchen under the leadership of Oni Madden. It didn't take long for his talent for violence to draw attention from more powerful figures. In 1926, local mobster Dutch Schultz snapped him up for his own organisation, where Coll proved himself as a brutal enforcer.
And this brings us to Dutch Schultz, real name Arthur Simon Flegenheimer, and his story in many ways mirrors Vincent Coll's.
Schultz was born in 1901 in a crowded tenement building at 1690 2nd Avenue in Manhattan to German Jewish immigrant parents who had come from a small tobacco farming village called Turnbach, just south of Frankfurt. Like Coll, Schultz experienced tragedy at a young age. His father abandoned the family when he was just 14, a trauma so deep that Dutch spent the rest of his life claiming his father had died instead. Forced to provide for his mother and sister, Schultz dropped out of school and worked a string of odd jobs, including as a pressman for American Express. But legitimate work didn't satisfy him. He turned to petty crime, robbing homes in the Morrisania section of the Bronx, which quickly landed him in trouble with the law. He spent the next 5 years in and out of reformatories. Whilst he was inside, the 18th Amendment passed, ushering in prohibition and changing the criminal underworld forever. Now, the manufacture, sale and transportation of alcohol was illegal, and this was fantastic news for men like Schultz, who were willing to break the law. Upon his release from jail, Schultz took a job guarding bootlegging trucks for a company called Schultz Trucking. Though the business was legitimate on the surface, it also smuggled liquor for extra profit. It was during this time that he abandoned his real name and adopted the more intimidating nickname, Dutch Schultz. Like Coll, Dutch rose quickly. His reputation for brutality and his willingness to kill without hesitation made him a force in the underworld. Eventually, he controlled all of the booze in the Bronx, earning him the nickname, the Beer Baron of the Bronx. Every speakeasy in the borough, secret bars that still sold booze despite the law, bought Dutch's product.
Dutch Schultz's own violent reputation became legend, and it was one that was epitomised by one notorious incident that happened in the Bronx. So Dutch Schultz beat a rival beer seller called Joey Rock so savagely that he actually broke both the man's arms and legs. He then blindfolded Joey Rock with a bandage that was soaked in pus from a gonorrhea infection. It was taken from a prostitute in a local brothel, and Joe Rock ended up going blind, but unfortunately for him, the torture didn't end there. He was then strung up by his thumbs on meat hooks in one of Schultz's beer warehouses. He was beaten so savagely and methodically that his ribs cracked one by one. Finally, on the brink of death, Dutch Schultz announced that Joey Rock was being held for ransom, and his family were allowed the privilege of paying $35,000 for what was left of Joe Rock. The word of this ordeal spread fast, and it was only fueling Schultz's already dangerous ego. Not only was it a display of just complete psychopathic behaviour, it was a clear message. No one in their right mind crossed Dutch Schultz. Well, that is, until Vincent Coll decided to.
By this point in the middle of the Roaring Twenties, Coll had risen through the ranks of the Schultz mob to become one of his most trusted and feared enforcers. Schultz frequently dispatched him to negotiate with uncooperative speakeasy owners who were refusing to buy Schultz's beer as he expanded his operations from the Bronx into Manhattan. Coll was extremely effective. Most people gave in, but when they didn't, things got ugly. In one instance, in 1927, Vincent Coll shot and killed a speakeasy owner named Anthony Borello and his wife, right in their bar in front of 15 witnesses. He was arrested and put on trial, but thanks to Schultz's deep pockets and political connections, the charges disappeared. By 1928, with Coll's help, Schultz and his business partner Joey Noy, of whom no photographs have survived, had successfully expanded into Manhattan. They now controlled a substantial share of the city's lucrative booze rackets, but they wanted more. Specifically, they wanted the territory ran by Legs Diamond, a violent Irish mobster who wasn't about to give up control without a fight. What followed was a bloody turf war. Diamond struck first when he shot and killed Joey Noy outside the Chateau Madrid speakeasy on West 54th Street. Schultz was absolutely devastated, but he didn't mourn long. He retaliated quickly and violently, unleashing Vincent Coll and his gunmen to hit Diamond's crew with everything they had. Just 2 hours after the attack on Noy, a blue Cadillac with a door missing was found on the Lower East Side. Inside was the bullet-ridden body of Louis Weinberg, a member of Legs Diamond's gang. The bullets came from a Thompson submachine gun fired by none other than Vincent Coll. The war with Diamond gave Coll a new opportunity. With Joey Noy gone, the position beside Schultz, the role of an equal, was suddenly vacant, and Vincent Coll had every intention of filling it, but Coll's brazenness cost him. In 1929, Vincent Coll and another Schultz associate, Carmine Borelli, carried out a robbery without Dutch's approval. They targeted the Sheffield Farms milk plant, located at 1075 Webster Avenue in the Bronx, posing as armed guards to gain access to the cashier's room. Without firing a single shot, they filled their sacks with over $17,000 in cash, around $300,000 today, and calmly exited out the back door. An uncharacteristically clean job for Coll, who was more known for his violence than his subtlety. Schultz was furious, but Coll remained unfazed. He hadn't asked for permission and didn't plan to. The reality was, Vincent needed the money to support his increasingly lavish lifestyle. Unlike the tight-fisted Dutch, Coll lived large. Silk shirts, hand-tailored suits, and a collection of fedoras, usually tilted to the side. He drank in the city's most exclusive clubs, drove the fastest cars, and attracted attention wherever he went. Standing at an athletic 5'10" with a baby face and curly blonde hair, the newspapers at the time noted that the charming and charismatic Coll could have made it as a movie star had he not chosen a gun instead.
When Coll and Schultz next crossed paths, Dutch confronted him over the unauthorised heist. He reminded Vincent that any job done required his sign-off, but Coll didn't apologise. Instead, he told Schultz that it was his tactics and reputation that helped build the Schultz empire, and, remarkably, there and then, he demanded to be made an equal. But Schultz already had a partner once, Joey Noy, and as far as the Dutchman was concerned, Joey was irreplaceable. Whilst Coll was a dangerous and unpredictable killer, Schultz was on a whole nother level of viciousness, and this wasn't good news for Vincent.
The confrontation drove a wedge between the two men who had once been close, and while Coll was impulsive and dangerous, Schultz was cold and calculating, an entirely different kind of threat. Vincent had made himself a powerful enemy. For now though, he stayed on the Schultz payroll. By January 1930, Coll had begun planning his exit. He intended to start his own mob, recruiting discontented Schultz men who were frustrated with the crew's lack of growth and poor pay. Unlike most gangs, Schultz paid his men a flat weekly salary rather than a percentage of their haul, a policy that left many hungry for more. Coll, never one to fear rebellion, stepped up as their leader.
But the fallout from the Sheffield Farms job hadn't fully cooled. Tension still lingered between Coll and Borelli over how the loot had been divided. When Borelli caught wind of Coll's breakaway plan, Vincent feared that Carmine might tip off Schultz, who almost definitely would order Coll's death. So Vincent struck first.
At around 2 a.m. on February the 13th, 1930, Borelli and his girlfriend, Mame Layton, were returning to their apartment at 1416 Wythe Place in the Bronx. Spotting them entering the building, Coll and two of his loyalists, Patsy Del Greco and Frank Esposito, hopped out of their car and, without warning, ambushed the lovers with machine gun fire. The couple ran in different directions and Borelli was the first to drop. He died outside the apartment. Mame Layton managed to run towards East 170th Street, but the agile Coll caught up with her and shot her once in the back. She collapsed at this spot. While she lay on the sidewalk, screaming and struggling to get back to her feet, Coll stood over her and pumped 3 more bullets into her head before racing to the getaway car driven by another Coll loyalist, Fats McCarthy. Carmine Borelli and Mame Layton were driven to Morrisania Hospital, but were both pronounced dead upon arrival. Coll was arrested for the double homicide, but once again walked free due to insufficient evidence. The murder infuriated Schultz. It was a public demonstration of weakness within his own ranks, something rival crews would notice. He declared war on Coll. Despite the looming war, the Coll gang, as they were now dubbed by the press, was strong in numbers. Many of Schultz's men had jumped ship and defected to the Coll mob. Coll's older brother Peter was his right-hand man, and the gang also included the likes of Frank Giordano, Tuffy Odierno, Patsy Del Greco, Fats McCarthy, Michael Barzile, Fiore Barzile, Frank Facciano, Arthur Palumbo, Jimmy DeLucia, and Roy Sloan. Schultz had lost a major portion of his muscle. But the Dutch had other problems too. He was also engaged in a separate war, this one with Special Prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey, who was trying to pin him for tax evasion. Because of this, it wasn't until over a year later that the first official blood was spilled in the Bronx Beer Wars. During this time, Coll had been carving out his own territory in New York, muscling his way in on speakeasies that had once been under Dutch Schultz's control by threatening the owners, a tactic he had perfected when he was in the Dutch's ranks. One of those clubs that he'd recently acquired was the Mad Dog Boat Club, located at 251 Dyckman Street in Upper Manhattan. And on May the 12th, 1931, Roy Sloan, a Coll gang henchman, was drinking with 3 associates in the establishment. At around 1 AM, Sloan stepped outside with one of the associates. A parked car down the street suddenly started its engine and slowly rolled past. A passenger door swung open and a man with a shotgun opened fire. Sloan was hit twice and died at the scene. His companions fled. Schultz had received a tip that Coll would be there that night. Sloan bore a strong resemblance to Coll, and the Schultz gunman mistakenly killed Sloan, thinking it was Coll. Regardless, the message was clear. Dutch Schultz had drawn first blood. 3 days later, Coll struck back. Dominic Borelli, a high-ranking member of the Schultz mob, was found dead in his Bronx apartment. Mike Barzil, one of Coll's top gunmen, had kicked in the front door and pumped 4 bullets into Borelli. Coll had evened the score with the Dutchman, but for him, that still wasn't enough. 2 weeks later, on May the 28th, 1931, Schultz Lieutenant Joey Rayo was standing outside a Schultz-owned speakeasy at 164 East 116th Street, enjoying the night air with Louis Slats Bologna and Big Dick Amato. At around 10 PM, a sedan rolled by with 6 Coll men inside. They opened fire with Tommy guns from inside the vehicle. Amato and Bologna were killed instantly and died where they stood on the sidewalk. Rayo, the main target, escaped down an alleyway unharmed. Coll had sent a message of his own, but Schultz would retaliate with a killing that shattered Coll to his core. At 2 AM on May the 30th, just 2 days later, Peter Coll was driving through West Harlem when he stopped at an intersection near Central Park. Suddenly, a blue sedan pulled up alongside him. 3 gunmen opened fire before speeding away. Peter was hit 6 times and died shortly after.
Peter's death absolutely devastated Vincent. It was the worst moment of his life. It was more painful than losing his mother or even being abandoned by his father. He and Peter had grown up together in the violent streets of the Bronx, and they'd stood side by side throughout their lives. Now, Coll's closest ally had been taken away from him, and Vincent vowed revenge.
The very next day, he struck back. Around a dozen Schultz men were gathered at the Hub Bowling Alley on East 149th Street. At 2:30 AM, only a few were left, including 20-year-old Gennaro Chin Yadaroli, a money collector and craps game operator for Schultz. Coll, Patsy Del Greco, and Fiore Barzil entered posing as spectators. Using the sound of a bowling ball smashing into the pins as cover, the trio backed towards the exit and opened fire. Yadaroli died instantly, and with that, the 4th gangster funeral in as many days took place at St. Raymond's Cemetery.
The day after the bowling alley killing, Coll and his gang broke into one of Dutch's garages and destroyed over 120 slot machines using crowbars. They then set 10 booze delivery trucks on fire, and it was quite evident to everyone that Coll was now going after Schultz's income, knowing full well that Dutch valued money more than human life. That said, Coll still took a pleasure in wiping out Schultz's men whenever the opportunity arose, and for the 3rd consecutive day since the death of his brother, Coll continued in his rampage.
On June the 3rd, Schultz henchman Louis DeRosa was found shot in the head 7 times, execution style, and then dumped in a Bronx gutter by Coll and his gang. 5 days later, on June the 8th, another Schultz man, 24-year-old John Jacoparo, was found near the Bronx Zoo with 6 bullets in his back and head. He had tried to flee when he saw Coll emerge from a vehicle, but just like Mame Layton, Coll was too agile for him. A week later, 46-year-old Abe Rosenberg, one of Schultz's top collectors, was found dead in Queens, his skull crushed and a bullet through his brain. Coll had dumped him in this lay-by and now was making a serious dent in the Schultz operation. But Vincent wasn't solely relying on bullets alone. He also gave information to the feds. On June the 18th, Schultz and his bodyguard, Dangerous Danny Yamesha, spotted 2 men outside Schultz's swanky 5th Avenue apartment. Recently, Dutch had spent a lot more time here, laying low out of fear of Coll.
Dutch was someone who loved the limelight. He loved being seen at New York's most prestigious clubs and events, but Coll had scared him into reclusiveness. This evening was one of the rare times that Dutch was prepared to leave his apartment. Using binoculars, Dutch and Danny believed the 2 men lingering were Coll's men, so they went outside and confronted them. Danny pulled his gun, but the men were actually NYPD detectives Steve DeRosa and Julius Selke, who were staking out Dutch's place on orders from Thomas Dewey, who was trying to build another case against Schultz.
Schultz fled through the streets, shouting for help. When the detectives caught up and identified themselves, he laughed in relief. "Jesus, fellas," he said, "you scared the shit out of me. I thought you were gangsters. There's a lot of them after me, you know." He was arrested for possession of a handgun, had his mugshot taken, and was released on a $75,000 bail. Coll had tipped off Dewey to Schultz's whereabouts through a corrupt NYPD contact on his payroll. Dangerous Danny Yamesha was a well-liked Italian mobster, respected across all corners of New York's underworld, and his death left a deep impact on many. Dutch Schultz personally contributed $16,000 for a German silver coffin and helped cover the funeral expenses. The result was one of the most extravagant mob funerals of the era. A procession of 75 private limousines and 50 additional cars followed Danny's white hearse from his residence at 2313 Belmont Avenue in the Bronx to Our Lady of Mount Carmel Catholic Church just down the street. More than 3,000 locals from the heart of the Italian neighborhood came out to honor him.
One of the 3,000 locals was Yamesha's girlfriend, Irene Comerford. No photos have survived of Irene, but she was grieving badly over the loss of her boyfriend, and the day after Danny's funeral, she threw herself out of a hotel window and died, aged just 26. Though she was not a direct casualty of the violence, her death marked the second woman's life lost in the wake of the increasingly savage Bronx Beer Wars.
3 days later, Schultz gunman John Soricelli answered a knock at his front door. Coll and Patsy Del Greco greeted him with a "Hey John," before firing 4 shots into Soricelli and fleeing. Incredibly, Soricelli didn't collapse immediately. He staggered back to his bed, asked his wife for a cigarette, and died a few hours later.
At this point, Schultz had had enough. Whether he was drunk, desperate, or simply losing his grip, he walked into the 42nd Street precinct in the Bronx, straight into the detective's office, and he made a quite shocking offer. He said, "I'll buy any one of you a house in Westchester County if you kill Vincent Coll. He's driving me out of my mind." When he was challenged by the shocked detectives if he knew where he was, Schultz didn't flinch. "Yes," he said, "I know what I'm doing. I've been here before. I'm just saying I'll pay good to whichever cop offs the mick." It's almost unthinkable today, a mobster walking straight into a police station and casually offering a bribe to have someone killed. But that's the level of chaos that Vincent Coll had brought to New York City and to the Dutchman. To fund his escalating war with Dutch Schultz, Vincent Coll and his tight-knit crew, well, they turned to kidnapping. At first, Coll's crew stuck to kidnapping rival gangsters, the kind of men that wouldn't dare go to the police and definitely couldn't report a ransom to the IRS without exposing their own criminal operations. It was a clever move. Coll got the money, avoided the law, and he stayed off the radar.
With Coll kidnapping and stealing money, I think it's important that we keep ours safe, and that brings me on to today's sponsor, Extra, makers of what I genuinely think is the best smart wallet out there. Smart wallets are 100% the future, and the Extra Wallet Pro is hands down the best I've used. It holds up to 14 cards in cash, comes in 7 colours, and is made from premium Italian leather that not only looks great, but feels durable and is built to last. It's also the slimmest leather wallet out there, and it feels sleek, practical and comfortable in your pocket. It's got RFID blocking for extra security, and the quick access button is a game changer. One press and your cards pop out smoothly. No more fumbling at the till, which happens to me on a near daily basis. I've paired mine with the Finder card, which connects to Apple's Find My app, so if I ever misplace it, I can track it in an instant. It's basically unlosable. Right now, Extra's running a 4th of July sale until July the 14th with up to 44% off, and if you use the code Last Supper, you get an extra 10% off stacked on top. Hit the link in the description to grab yours today whilst the sale's still on, and thanks once again to Extra for supporting the channel.
Vincent Coll's kidnapping endeavours proved fruitful, but even in the violent world of organised crime, there were unspoken rules, and Coll had crossed the line. Kidnapping fellow gangsters, well, that wasn't just bad for business, it made him toxic. The underworld turned its back on him, and he was now a man with no allies, in a world where you needed allies.
Soon, he widened his scope and began targeting prominent figures from New York's high society and entertainment world. His first high-profile victim was legendary singer Rudy Vallee. A successful endeavour, Coll received a $100,000 ransom for Vallee's safe return. Next came Sherman Billingsley, owner of the ultra-fashionable Stork Club and arguably the most famous restaurant in the city. He was released after his family paid $25,000. Then Coll abducted a banker called Billy Warren, who paid $83,000 for his freedom. Much of the ransom money was spent bribing police officials, allowing Coll to continue these brazen abductions without any serious interference. But Coll's most audacious move came next. One night, Coll and his men rolled up to the Club Argonaut on 7th Avenue and kidnapped its owner, Big Frenchie Demonge. Demonge wasn't just a club operator, he was Oni, the killer Madden's close associate and business partner. Madden had once been Coll's mentor in the Gopher Gang, but now he was the powerful owner of Harlem's Cotton Club and one of the most influential crime figures in New York. By abducting Demonge, Coll wasn't just making money, he was picking a fight with a kingpin. Later that night, Coll personally called Madden at the Cotton Club and negotiated Demonge's release for $35,000. Madden paid and told Coll that that was very unwise, Vincent, and began plotting his revenge. A few weeks later, Coll was arrested on the kidnapping charge of Rudy Vallee. From jail, he made a bold move. He called Dutch Schultz and threatened to expose key details about his operations unless Dutch paid his bail. Schultz, trapped between silence and scandal, reluctantly handed over $75,000, but Coll skipped town, skipping the trial and forfeiting the money. When Schultz demanded reimbursement, Coll refused. It was another personal insult in an already bitter feud. Rather than dial things down, Coll escalated. Coll and his crew prepared to wipe out another of Schultz's men, this time targeting Joey Rayo, a top lieutenant in Dutch's mob who Coll had already tried to kill just 2 months prior. That night, Joey Rayo stood outside the Helmar Social Club on East 107th Street, one of Dutch Schultz's speakeasies, nestled in a densely packed Manhattan neighbourhood. It was a typical sweltering summer evening. Children ran barefoot along the sidewalk, their laughter echoing between tenement walls. Upstairs, residents leaned out of open windows, fanning themselves in the heavy air. Out of nowhere, an open touring car screeched to a stop in front of the club. Inside sat Vincent Coll and 5 of his gunmen. They didn't hesitate. A shotgun blast rang out from the vehicle, immediately followed by the sharp cracks of a .45 pistol. Rayo dove behind cover and somehow emerged unharmed. The same couldn't be said for the children who were playing nearby. 5-year-old Michael Vengali was shot and died the following morning. His 7-year-old brother took 5 bullets. A 3-year-old baby, napping in a stroller, was hit twice in the back. The pram was left riddled with buckshot, as seen in this photograph. 2 more children, aged 5 and 14, were also wounded, but managed to survive.
The city was horrified. The story dominated the headlines, and footage of Vengali's grief-stricken mother enraged the public. This war had now turned into something bigger than 2 gangsters fighting over territory and money. This had turned into a war that had killed over 20 mobsters on each side, 2 innocent young women, and a 5-year-old boy who was simply playing on the street with his friends and family. And now, this war, well, it had to end.
Coll was identified as the culprit from witnesses on East 107th Street, and when Coll's name hit the press, the media branded him the baby killer. He became the most hated man in New York, and the NYPD named him their #1 most wanted fugitive. The city's mayor, Jimmy Walker, himself the son of Irish immigrants, referred to him as a mad dog, a label that stuck for life. Police Commissioner Edward Mulrooney responded by ordering an all-out war on Mad Dog Coll. He authorised a citywide crackdown and issued a shoot-to-kill instruction to his officers. The manhunt began immediately, but the Mad Dog had disappeared. He dyed his blonde hair black, grew a moustache, and vanished into the city. He hid out with his girlfriend, Lottie Kreisberger, in the Cornish Arms Hotel on West 23rd Street, but it wasn't safe in New York City for Coll anymore. In a strange twist, Mad Dog Coll reached out to Legs Diamond. Diamond had recently relocated to Albany in upstate New York and also despised Schultz after their earlier gang war. Coll paid him a visit. He proposed that they abandon New York altogether and form a bootlegging empire in other states. Diamond, despite knowing that Coll had once tried to kill him on Schultz's orders, agreed. They believed there was millions to be made, and if they could escape the chaos of the city, even better. Diamond wanted to be sure that Coll and Schultz hadn't made a secret truce or were plotting against him, so he demanded that Coll prove his loyalty. Mad Dog Coll returned to New York City and immediately resumed his offensive tactics. On October the 2nd, Joe Mullins, one of Schultz's garage managers, was standing outside a Bronx warehouse when a brown Buick pulled up. Frank Giordano was at the wheel. Coll and Tuffy Odierno stepped out, walked up to Mullins and shot him 3 times in the head. Before leaving, Coll placed 2 pennies over Joe Mullins' eyes, a symbolic payment for Charon, the mythological ferryman who carried souls across the River Styx to the afterlife. The next day, Coll and his crew bombed the Majestic Garage on Westchester Avenue, another Schultz stronghold. No one was killed, but the building was reduced to rubble.
More unsuccessful bombings and drive-by shootings occurred in the following weeks. Vincent Coll was making it clear to Legs Diamond that there was absolutely no truce with Dutch. Then came a surprising break, which Coll didn't foresee. In December 1931, Coll and Frank Giordano were arrested and charged with the murder of Michael Vengali. A witness named George Brecht had claimed that he could identify Coll as the shooter on East 107th Street. The newspapers printed pictures of Coll in the electric chair, and everyone in the city thought that this was the end of the line for the Mad Dog.
But their defense attorney was Samuel Leibovitz, one of the sharpest legal minds in New York. Leibovitz skillfully dismantled the prosecution's case, exposing George Brecht as a serial professional witness who had offered similar testimony in other cities to collect the cash reward. Under pressure, Brecht had a breakdown in front of the jury and was committed to Bellevue Hospital's psychiatric ward. With the case unravelling, the charges against Coll were dropped. He had escaped justice again, but once more, Coll overplayed his hand. Shortly after the trial, he accepted a $50,000 contract to kill Charles "Lucky" Luciano, one of the most powerful gangsters in America. The job came from Salvatore Maranzano, who had just emerged victorious in the Castellamarese War and declared himself Capo di Capi, the boss of all bosses. Maranzano arranged for Coll to ambush Luciano during a meeting with Maranzano at his office in the landmark building at 230 Park Avenue, now known as the Helmsley Building. But Luciano got wind of the plot thanks to a tip from his trusted ally Tommy Lucchese, and Luciano acted first. On the day that Coll was scheduled to kill him, Luciano sent 4 Jewish hitmen from Murder Inc., a ruthless enforcement arm led by Louis Lepke and Albert Anastasia, 2 of Luciano's top lieutenants. The 4 hitmen entered Maranzano's office posing as federal agents, disarmed his guards and stabbed him to death before Coll even arrived. Luciano didn't know at the time who Maranzano had hired to kill him until his gunmen spotted the Mad Dog arriving at the scene and then fleeing when he saw Luciano's men. Now Luciano had a new target. He reached out to Oni Madden, someone who had known the Mad Dog since he was a child, and offered him $50,000 to kill Coll, the same amount of money that Coll had accepted for the hit on Luciano. Dutch Schultz matched the offer. The combined bounty, $100,000, or more than $2 million today, made Coll the most wanted man in the underworld. Dozens of contract killers went looking for him, 2 in particular, Leonard Scanici and Tony the Wop Fabrizio, got a solid lead, almost certainly from Schultz himself. On February the 1st, 1932, Scanici and Fabrizio stormed a house at 1216 Commonwealth Avenue in the Bronx. This was the headquarters of Coll's gang. Inside were several of Coll's key men. Patsy Del Greco was killed instantly. Fiore Barzile was also killed. Emily Torrizello, an innocent 32-year-old guest, was shot dead. 3 young children were injured but survived. But Vincent Coll wasn't there. He showed up 30 minutes later, saw the police outside and fled. Just like at the Mad Dog Boat Club, once again he had narrowly escaped death. The public was outraged by the latest bloodshed. Even though Coll hadn't pulled the trigger, the violence always seemed to follow him. The NYPD, facing pressure from the mayor, the media and the public, had had enough. And so had New York's crime bosses. Dutch Schultz and Oni Madden quietly agreed that Vincent Coll had to die.
A few days after the Commonwealth Avenue killings, Coll received word that Oni Madden, a figure he trusted from his Gopher days, wanted to meet. Madden had apparently brokered a settlement between the 2 warring criminal factions, promising a deal that would satisfy everyone and, most importantly for Coll, save his life. Vincent had known Madden for most of his life and still trusted him, despite having recently kidnapped Madden's business partner, Demonge, and demanded money for his release. To Coll, this betrayal hadn't damaged their friendship or loyalty, but this naivety from the Mad Dog's perspective would prove to be his fatal mistake.
The fake meeting was arranged in Hell's Kitchen, a neighbourhood under Madden's protection, where Coll believed he'd be safe. To avoid any confusion and to ensure Coll would be recognised by the hitmen sent to kill him, Dutch Schultz arranged for Bo Weinberg to accompany the assassins Scarnici and Fabrizio. Weinberg was a high-ranking Schultz mobster who had worked with Coll before but remained loyal to Schultz throughout the brutal gang war. Vincent was now a desperate man. Every mob hitman in New York was hunting for him for the $100,000 bounty on his head. On the night of February the 7th, Coll and his loyal girlfriend, Lottie Kreisberger, checked into the Cornish Arms Hotel on 23rd Street in Hell's Kitchen. At around 12:30 AM, Coll left his room to make a pre-arranged phone call to Oni Madden, seeking details of the meeting scheduled for the next day. Carrying only $101.48 and unarmed, he crossed the street to the London Chemist drugstore, took one of the 3 phone booths at the back and dialed Madden. Mad Dog Coll was eager to accept the truce proposed by Dutch Schultz and the other New York mobsters who had been hunting him relentlessly. At 23 years of age, things had been brutal for the baby-faced Irishman. He was nearly broke, his crew was decimated, and he was still mourning the death of his brother Peter a year earlier. Madden listened patiently to Coll's story and kept him on the line just long enough for Dutch to arrange Scarnici, Fabrizio and Weinberg's arrival in a blacked-out limousine. About 10 minutes after the call began, Weinberg approached the drugstore window and confirmed Coll's identity to Scarnici and Fabrizio, then returned to the driver's seat of the getaway car. Fabrizio waited at the door, anticipating that what was left of Coll's men would rush out of the hotel across the street once the shooting started. As he passed the cashier, he quietly whispered, "Keep cool now, and no one gets hurt." Then, pulling a Thompson submachine gun from beneath his overcoat, Scarnici moved towards the phone booth and unleashed the entire 50-round drum at Vincent Coll. Coll's body slumped forward out of the booth as Scarnici made a swift exit. He had sustained devastating injuries. A bullet shattered the right side of his face, breaking his nose and lodging in his brain. 2 bullets struck his forehead, another settled above his heart, and he suffered 7 wounds in his right arm and 4 in his left. Scarnici left no doubt. Vincent Coll's fate was sealed. The Mad Dog was dead.
The hit on Vincent Coll took just 90 seconds. When the gunfire stopped, the most feared and the most hated gangster in New York, well, he lay dead on the floor of a drugstore phone booth, and with that, the Bronx Beer Wars died with him.
According to the coroner's report, 15 bullets were recovered from his body, but the sheer number of exit wounds suggested many more had ripped through him, evidence of the lethal precision with which Leonard Scarnici had carried out the job. Back at the scene, a crowd quickly gathered to catch a glimpse of the fallen baby killer. Amongst them came a frantic Lottie Kreisberger, who had heard the gunshots from the Cornish Arms Hotel. Screaming and distraught, she pushed through the crowd to reach the man she called her husband. Later, at police headquarters, she played the gangster's wife to perfection, defiant, tight-lipped, and evasive in her answers. A few days later, Vincent Coll was buried in St. Raymond Cemetery in the Bronx, next to his brother, Peter. For a man who had dominated the headlines, the funeral was sparsely attended. One notable exception was a wreath sent by Dutch Schultz, and its banner read simply, "From the Boys," a cryptic nod to the gang they once shared before Coll went rogue. Despite his hunger for notoriety, luxury and respect, Coll was mourned by few. Lottie Kreisberger remained his most devoted mourner. They had applied for a marriage license just a month before his murder, but never made it to the altar. Still, the press would forever refer to her as Mad Dog Coll's widow. Her own story took a darker turn. 6 months after Vincent's death, Lottie was arrested for the accidental shooting of a bystander during a bank robbery in the Bronx. She served nearly a decade at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, and after her parole in 1943, she vanished, ignoring an arrest warrant for violating her parole. It's believed she fled west, changed her name, and disappeared completely. Her fate remains unknown. As is often the case in bloody underworld executions like Coll's, those involved in his murder did not escape their own karma. Tony the Wop Fabrizio met a violent end just 8 months after Coll's, on November the 20th, 1932. He had been involved in a botched assassination attempt on Bugsy Siegel, a key soldier in Lucky Luciano's organisation, after the two had a disagreement about a separate hit. The failed hit on Bugsy sparked tensions, and Luciano demanded retribution. Desperate to save himself, Tony threatened to go to the police unless Luciano backed off. That threat sealed his fate. He was tracked down and shot 3 times inside his own Brooklyn home. Leonard Scanici, the triggerman who ended Coll's life, faced the electric chair at Sing Sing in 1935 after he was found guilty of killing a police detective during a Manhattan bank robbery 2 years earlier. Bo Weinberg, the man who had identified Coll whilst he was in the phone booth, didn't fare much better. Despite playing a key role in taking out Coll, his loyalty to Dutch Schultz came into question. When Schultz learned that Weinberg had been in talks with Lucky Luciano about dividing Dutch's rackets if Thomas Dewey was successful in putting him behind bars for tax evasion, Schultz confronted Weinberg, who confessed, and that sealed his fate. Bo was kidnapped leaving a Manhattan nightclub. Schultz's men then encased his feet in cement on one of Dutch's boats and dumped him into the East River. His body was never found, and as for Dutch Schultz, he wouldn't last much longer. By 1935, he was under intense pressure. Thomas Dewey, the relentless federal prosecutor, was closing in fast with a tax evasion case that could bring the Dutchman down for good. Backed into a corner and known for his volatile temper, Dutch proposed a radical solution: to kill Thomas Dewey. He took the idea to the Commission, the governing body of the American Mafia, but they shut it down immediately. Killing a high-profile government official like Dewey would bring a tidal wave of law enforcement and public outrage, threatening everything that they'd built to this point. The message to Schultz was clear: stand down and leave Dewey alone. But Dutch didn't take orders well. Proud, furious, and running out of moves, he stormed out of the commission meeting, declaring that Dewey would be killed within 48 hours, approval or not, and that outburst signed his death warrant.
To the syndicate, Schultz had crossed the line. No one, no matter how powerful, could defy the commission and risk the entire organisation. The decision was unanimous: Dutch Schultz had to die. The job was passed over to Louis Lepke Buchalter, who in turn passed it to his elite death squad, Murder Inc.
Louis Lepke chose his team carefully. He assigned Charles the Bug Workman, a calm, methodical hitman who prided himself on precision and had 20 confirmed kills for Murder Inc. Alongside him was Emmanuel Mendy Weiss, a trusted enforcer known for his intelligence and willingness to get his hands dirty. On the rainy night of October the 23rd, 1935, Dutch Schultz sat in the Palace Chop House at 12 East Park Street in Newark, New Jersey. He'd been forced out of New York City by the new mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, who had declared Schultz a public menace and ordered the NYPD to shoot him on sight if he ever returned to the city. Newark, however, was no safe haven, but it was where Dutch made his final stand. It was just another Prohibition-era night until Workman and Weiss walked in. Without warning, they opened fire. 3 of Schultz's top men were gunned down instantly. Otto Abadabba Berman, his loyal accountant and fixer, Abe Landau, his ever-present bodyguard, and Lulu Rosenkrantz, his driver and main muscle. Moments later, the scene the murdering hitmen left behind was carnage. Blood pooled on the floors, bodies slumped at tables, but Dutch, incredibly, didn't die immediately. He clung to life for nearly 24 hours, drifting in and out of consciousness, muttering bizarre, incoherent phrases that became infamous in mob lore, strange final words from a man who had once ruled the Bronx with absolute fear. Dutch Schultz died the next day at the age of 34.
The Palace Chop House hit would go down as one of the most iconic executions in organised crime history. It wasn't just the end of Dutch Schultz, it was a message. No one was bigger than the Commission, and no one, not even the Dutchman, was untouchable. And that concludes the Bronx Beer Wars, a fascinating tale of bloodshed and ruthless violence which became one of the deadliest gang wars that New York had ever seen, resulting in over 40 mobster deaths, 2 innocent women, and not to mention 5-year-old Michael Vengali. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and becoming a subscriber if you like. If not, that's absolutely fine. I'll see you in the next one.